Okay, I want to welcome you all to our wonderful KOH Library and Cultural Center. And I'm very excited for this leg of Dr. Felder's journey with us because he's not going to be held to a time clock. So feel free to interact with him, ask questions. He's just such a lovely, delightful man. He's not going to scold us if we interrupt or ask questions. But of course, the main discussion session will be for the end of his comments. I wanted to mention that I'm sure many of you are aware that the Michael Bucina Inclusion Project, who is the entity that has provided this Scholar in Residence weekend, was created in honor of Michael, who will be here in a couple of minutes, his wonderful family, and all of the special needs children and adults in our community. It exists to provide resources for everyone seeking inclusion and resources for special needs. And with that information and, God willing, inspiration, we are dedicated to putting the principles of inclusion and tikkun olam into action. We constantly strive to be a model for the ideal of embracing and respecting each other because of our differences and never in spite of them. In Michael's short life, he has already been the inspiration and the catalyst for many truly wonderful things. And the project, Michael Bucina Inclusion Project, which gives him a voice, is just one of his many great accomplishments, even at his young age. And since the dedication of the Michael Bucina Inclusion Program about a year ago, we have amazingly grown so quickly and built such an amazing foundation. And we've had the pleasure of presenting many wonderful programs here in this library and cultural center. And our plans are to begin reaching out to the community, going into public schools. We've been invited by the Placer School District to go and give a workshop for a day, teaching children about Jewish religious principles and our ideals and how we go about including everybody in our community. At one of the programs that we gave for the school children at Mosaic Law, the second day we asked the kids to tell us what they had learned. And I just wanted to read something to you that one of the students quoted. We asked them what they had learned the day before, and this child raised his hand, and he had become very focused on autism because Mickey Zeff had been here and had been an amazing teacher along with his mom, Sherry. And this child said, I went home, and he said, I spoke to my parents about it at dinner. And he said, my dad said, yeah. He said, people with autism very many times are geniuses. And he said, and we had a long conversation about what I had learned today. He said, the way I define autism is that it's like a puzzle that never ends. Each puzzle piece is different and special, and all the pieces are needed to finish the puzzle. So this was out of the mouths of an elementary school student after having the opportunity to learn from a profound teacher who didn't even really have speech, and that's Mickey Zeff. So my congratulations to his very, very proud parents, and we hope to continue this kind of work. I also wanted to mention that both Mickey and Michael left, we finished up these programs with these two young boys having more friends than most people could count in a lifetime. And one of the goals of the Michael Bussina Inclusion Project is to create an environment where friendships are developed, people of all different abilities, and to go out and continue teaching about the importance of inclusion. Building on that, I would like to announce, I'm very proud to announce, on behalf of Michael's grandpa, we are launching a Mickey and Michael Tikkun Olam team, our very first special needs Tikkun Olam team. They were able to get it off the ground when we haven't even been able to get it off the ground yet for the synagogue. And Mickey and Michael will be, with our help, gathering food from people's gardens that normally would go to waste, and the food will be delivered to the hungry, the women's shelters, so that they can have fresh vegetables and fruits, good nutrition. And we will be starting that. Please look for information on campus, on our website, and I encourage anybody who has any fruit trees or have a vegetable garden with extra, more than you need, that we have found a very good purpose for anything extra. I also want to mention that we've been blessed with a new addition to our Michael Bussina Inclusion family, and I want to just draw your attention. A year ago we dedicated a plaque that read Michael Bussina Inclusion Project, dedicated by Dr. Bar Yochai and Tamara Davidov, their son Justin, and their grandchildren, Michael, Dovi Yochai, Liel, Noam, in honor of Michael Bussina and the special needs children of our community. Now there's another name on the plaque, and Brandon. And I'm sure you've all noticed him because he's just too cute to be true. But baby Brandon has joined Michael's family, and we've added in a new name, and we look forward to, well, I won't speak for him, but I'd love to get a few more names up there, so. And I encourage everybody to make use of the Michael Bussina Resource Center. We're also launching a bi-monthly newsletter that will be educational. It's called Michael's Voice. And our tagline is, not being able to speak does not mean that you do not have anything to say. And so this Michael's Voice will keep you updated on Michael's growth and progress, as well as Mickey's and the Mickey and Michael Tikkun Olam project, as well as resources and organizations in our community that we hope to partner with or to be a service to. I would also like to, at this point, give some special thanks to my dear friend Gay Tanner and her husband Paul. One of Leonard's claims to fame is that he happens to be Gay's cousin. And if it weren't for that lucky happenstance, we never would have been able to get somebody as amazing as Dr. Felder here in our library. And so, Gay, for all the things that you do proactively, I thank you. And for something that you really didn't have any control over, I thank you for that too. I also need to thank Dee Miller, who has been a godsend and has helped with our classes. She's an assistant technology. Yeah, a specialist in assistive technology, and has been a moral support. And I can't thank you enough, Dee. And I hope that by announcing this here today, that you will now feel that you really do need to continue helping me. No pressure. Within my thanks, the Committee on Inclusion and Disabilities from the Jewish Federation are responsible, or Deborah is directly responsible for giving me a great deal of guidance and teaching me many important things. And she also is why we have the honor of having these American Sign Language translators here present in the room. And so Deborah, could you just come up and just say a few words and let people know about the committee? And
Sure. I did share this already in the service, but not all of you were there. The Committee on Inclusion and Disability, part of Jewish Federation, is just very happy to partner with the Michael Bussina Inclusion Project this morning by providing the interpreters. But more importantly, we want to recognize the project for this amazing Scholar in Residence weekend, which is wrapping up a very full month of February. It started in February, from Jewish Disability Awareness Month. I don't know how many of you saw, we had basically a 2-page flyer of all of the programs taking place, I guess it's over there, throughout the Sacramento region, through the synagogues and the schools, Shalom School, the religious schools, acknowledging Jewish Disability Awareness Month, and so it's a beautiful thing to see. And after Shabbat, feel free to go to jewishsac.org and you can see our webpage, which is filled with lots of resources. Everybody and anybody is invited to come to our meetings, which are usually the second Thursday every other month. So the next one is April 10th. And that's it. This is more about Michael, so I'm going to turn it back over to Talia here.
thank you again, Deborah, for all of your help and support. I also just want to quickly thank the young lady Cindy and the entire crew. Joanne, I know you went and helped last night's oneg. They slaved away in a hot kitchen, which is not one of my fortes. You're very lucky that I wasn't in that kitchen. The cookies might not have been nearly as delicious. And then I need to thank Bar Yochai, Tamara, Eileen, Nursey, and Michael, Brandon, and your entire family, all the children, all the countless other people who have helped. And before I introduce Dr. Felder, I would like to allow you all the pleasure of having Eileen come forward and say a few things. Eileen is Michael's mother and a truly incredible and inspirational woman. So.
Nice to see everybody today. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. And yes, I'm Michael and Brennan's mother. And a year ago, the Michael Bussina Inclusion Project started, and I just cannot believe my eyes about how it has grown so much. The ideas behind the programs that we're doing now really don't come easy, and they take a lot of thought, time, and effort. From a distance, I live in San Francisco. From a distance, I'm seeing emails and having conversations, and I'm hearing about what's going on. There is so much work that goes into this, and really, the spine behind this whole project is Talia Berger. It's a heart of gold and a passion for what she's doing. I mean, she says this is the hat she likes to wear the most, is this project. It is so heartwarming and endearing for me as a mother to see people in the community like Talia who take an interest and really grow a seed into a flower, and now it's just becoming so much bigger. And I have to also say, I know my father works very closely with Talia in support, and there are others as well. I don't want to speak any longer. I just want to say I'm so proud and so amazed that in this community, this is growing, and thank you so much. Just from Michael's voice, but I'm a voice for all members of our community with family members with disabilities. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Nice to see all of you today, and Shabbat Shalom.
See, if she told me what she was going to say, I would never have given her the microphone. Thank you, Eileen. Okay. Now, on to the man of the hour. You all heard of his many, many credentials with Dr. Bob Zeff's wonderful introduction earlier this morning. One thing that I do want to say is that as a program director here in the library, I grapple with a lot of programs about Holocaust and subjects that are very difficult to talk about and to pull together on occasion. When Gay told me about Leonard, I'm not ashamed to admit that I jumped up and down and clapped my hands and said, oh my God, it's a dream come true that such a person exists, because this truly does speak to my heart. And I just personally want to tell you that I am honored to learn from you and to recharge my batteries by being in your presence. This gentleman here doesn't just walk the walk or talk the talk, he walks the walk. He's been active in Tikkun Olam projects. He and his wife, even with a special needs child in their careers, find the time to constantly give back to community. And I just want to mention that he received the Distinguished Merit Citation of the National Conference of Community and Justice for developing innovative programs to combat racism, sexism, homophobia, and religious prejudice. He's somebody that we can all learn a great deal from, and I, with great pleasure, would like to introduce again Dr. Leonard Felder.
Good afternoon, and a continued good Shabbos to you. This is quite a lovely Shabbat tradition that is being created here. I didn't know that we're in the first year of this wonderful project, and I just want to say that even though people from Los Angeles sometimes have some ego, tune in tomorrow night to the Oscars. And a lot of times people in Los Angeles think that they're the center of the universe and that everything that's new and original comes from there. What I've witnessed this weekend at this synagogue and at this library and with this program is that you're truly leading. You might not know it because you're just experiencing it the way you're experiencing it, but there's an inclusiveness to the thing. This isn't just a couple of hardworking people doing something and sending out emails that don't get responded to. This is a really beautiful thing. And when I was being driven from the airport by Bar Yochai, I learned a lot about water management. And I learned that water management, the leadership of that is also coming from Sacramento. That there are people who understand it better in Sacramento than we, who built a city of approximately 9 million people in the middle of the desert in Los Angeles, don't understand, but we learn it from people like you. And now I'm learning that in the inclusiveness and the way that a congregation's responding and the way that a community's responding it's a modeling thing. It's not just a couple of martyrs. That's what I've picked up most. It's not just a couple of martyrs working their buns off. It's a community responding. There was warmth in that service this morning. There was warmth in that service last night. There's warmth in the stories I've been hearing about different special ed bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs. There's something that you are modeling, and hopefully you'll bottle it and package it and other people can learn from it, because that's really the missing piece. There's lots of little segregated wonderful things for inclusion, but this is the real inclusion, where a community is being touched and is active. So I appreciate all the stories that people have been telling me. I'm learning from it. I'm going to take it back to Los Angeles, which could be second, behind Sacramento for following through on some of these things. Because a lot of things we have in Los Angeles, they exist off to the side. They exist off, in a corner. Yours is in the bright light of Shabbat today. So thank you for teaching me about that. I'm going to talk all over the place about today's afternoon theme, which is the benefits of being different. Some of it's going to have to do with special needs, but some of it's going to have to do with all of the ways that we are different, because I think, psychologically, that when people get a little less uncomfortable, when people get more comfortable with what makes them different, then they don't have to be as squeamish about other people's differences. So, in all areas, people are uncomfortable about something about yourself that has been picked on or is different, or you've had to hide, or you had to suppress it in order to make it in the world, or to find your way into a relationship. There was something you had to hide. And so then when you see someone who can't hide their difference, sometimes it's overwhelming because you learn to hide it. And in many families, people learn to hide it. Just one quick story. So in my wife's family, again, I'm telling another story from my wife's family. She has this one uncle who used to make her cry at every family gathering. And he would say hurtful things, and he would do hurtful things, and then she would try to say, stop it, and he'd say, you're too thin-skinned, you need to toughen up. So one year at Rosh Hashanah dinner at her mother's house, my wife took this uncle aside and said, we need to talk. She had enough therapy and enough whatever, and she was going to have the talk to him. For those of you who were raised in a Christian environment, it's the come to Jesus moment, where you really sit down and talk the emes with somebody. Very rarely do you hear Jesus and emes in the same So she sat down and talked the emes with this guy. She said, I love you, and you're a fascinating, inventive, creative, eccentric person, but I'm not going to ever talk to you again if you keep doing what you just did. So she said to him. And he said, what are you talking about? First of all, you're being oversensitive. I didn't do anything. And second of all, I loved you. I've always loved you. You're my favorite niece. And so they went back and forth. Meanwhile, Grandma at the table in the living room, they were off inside having a talk. She said, get them back here. They shouldn't be having a private conversation. We're working out as a family. So there was friction all over the place going on with this thing. And what she learned from him was that he was picked on by his father for not being the super student that his older brother was. And he was picked on for being, in those days they didn't say ADHD, but he was very ADHD. He was very hyperactive, very creative, couldn't sit still, couldn't do what the teacher wanted, but he became a great inventor and a great business person through his very wild ideas on how to do things differently. And he said, look, I learned to survive. I learned to survive by toughening up and by just, pushing my way through situations. And you're too sensitive, and I've always wanted to toughen you up. And she said, thank you for sharing that. She said, but no, that's not how I'm going to operate. I operate in a different universe than you do. And if we're ever going to have a relationship, you have to stop with that goal of yours to change me and to fix me. You don't need fixing. There was something about him coming to terms with his being different, and it switched after that conversation. He finally had outed himself as being a person who was a bully because he'd been bullied. And sometimes when we find that part of ourselves, the part that was suppressed, that put down in order to survive, we had to suppress, then we can become more open to someone who's doing something that we formerly couldn't imagine doing. And whether it's the utterances of a special needs child or whether it's your child who doesn't do things quite perfectly. Another great example of this is the movie with Richard Dreyfuss, and I'm blanking on the name where he's the music.
Mr. Holland's Opus.
Mr. Holland's Opus. It takes a village. So if you remember, he loves music and he has a child who doesn't hear so well, and it breaks his heart, and he cuts off from the child. But at the end of the movie, I'm doing a spoiler alert here, at the end of the movie, he eventually sings John Lennon's Beautiful Boy song to his son. He realizes this is his son, this is his soul, this is his connection. He needs to open up to this child's way of experiencing sound and music and the world. It's different from his way of experiencing it. So sometimes grieving that this child or this relative or this friend or even your person you're married to can't do the thing that I was hoping they could do. But there are some things they can do, and once you grieve the things they can't do, it's a breakthrough. So I want to talk briefly, and I want to open up for some conversations about some of the benefits of being different. And I want to start with a story that's in the first chapter of Fitting is Overrated. By the way, each one of my books gets rejected a lot, and the 10 challenges, which Fanny, you were supportive of when it first came out in 1997, the 10 challenges got rejected by 17 publishers, and they finally got a yes. And so I taught people in my therapy practice, the first 17 rejections don't count. The 7 prayers got rejected 11 times. Hold the mic this way. Thank you. Oh my goodness, that's so different. I had promised you before I was going to do a good job on that. Slicha. It's not slicha yet, but slicha. I did not do a good job on that. Thank you for pointing it out. And you may need to point it out again. So I'll assume that that's what that means if anybody does that. This is a good microphone. I might need to use it. Okay, so each book gets rejected a lot. This book got rejected by 11 publishers and eventually got a yes. And it was after an earlier book that I wrote that never got published. I didn't write the whole book, but it was called The Unconventional Learners Hall of Fame. And I wanted to say that people with learning differences learn differently. So let's honor all the people who learn differently and figure out, is there a Hall of Fame for them? It didn't go anywhere. But it turned into this book. And in this book, in the first chapter, there's a story about a woman from Peoria, Illinois. Her name was Betty Goldstein. And the Betty Goldstein story, to me, is very similar to what we're experiencing with the Michael Bussina project. Something happens that looks like it's not working, and then all of a sudden it not only does work, but it inspires others in so many ways. So Betty Goldstein grew up in Peoria, and at Central High School in Peoria, the whole big deal was, are you going to be in the sororities? Are you going to get pledged? You know, in sophomore year. This was in the 1940s and 50s. And she was a smart Jewish girl who brought books home, and she spoke up in class, and her parents told her to cut that out. You're never going to make it in the sororities. You're never going to get pledged. And you're never going to find a husband if you keep having opinions, and if you keep taking books home, and if you keep arguing with your teachers. And her father was in the jewelry business, and her mother, who was also very smart, had learned to just focus on her appearance and jewelry and all those things to make it in the society in Peoria, Illinois. So Betty Goldstein did not get accepted in any sororities, and she used to cry every Friday and Saturday night being alone in her room. But she was really smart. She became a journalist and a researcher, and when she was in high school and then at Smith College, she began to do research on why is it that women suppress a big part of who they are. Is it always going to be that way, and why is it that way? How does that work? You probably know her by her married name, Betty Friedan. So Betty Friedan was angry, and she was hurt, and she was sad, and she took that brokenness and she turned it into support groups. The consciousness raising that she gave to millions and millions of women, and to men as well, about what was possible. Was there such a thing as an egalitarian relationship? Was there such a thing as women having a voice? Was there such a thing as women being in professions? Before Betty Friedan, there were all sorts of professions that women could not get into or couldn't rise within. Things like medicine, things like most of the professions that those of you are in. It was because of her. She changed more about the world during her lifetime. She wasn't perfect. She was prejudiced about this, and she was imperfect about that. By prejudice, when the lesbians were trying to have more of a voice in the women's movement, Betty Friedan tried to shut them down. You know, she was very uncomfortable with parts of herself and parts of the world, but she shook things up and she made things happen. It came from pain. So the spiritual question I wanted to ask today is, why is it? Why is it that we respond to pain better than we respond to complacency? And how has that been true in your life? How has that been true in your life that sometimes it's the painful things, it's the things that seem broken, that are the things that wake us up to figuring out there has to be more to life than this, or there has to be a way to even make this good. There's a Hebrew phrase which I talk about in one of the chapters of Here I Am, called Gamzu Latova. And Gamzu Latova is at least 2,000 years old, and the guy who started saying that said that when something painful would happen, he would say, even this, Gamzu Latova, even this is for good, will be for good, might be for good. You could decide how you translate that. Now, it's a horrible phrase to say at the wrong moment to someone. When a widow has just lost her husband, and you walk into the Shiva minyan, and you say, Gamzu Latova, even this will be for good, you need to leave. You need to leave and take some classes on social appropriateness. Okay? And there are people who do that. On the other hand, it's a meditation to say to yourself when you're ready, not before you're ready, but when you're ready, even this could possibly be for good. Now again, I mentioned this morning, I don't know how the universe works. But for some reason, people who have some situation going on in their life turns beautiful relatives into donors and creators of amazing organizations and amazing interventions. Speak up. I thought you were pointing to Hashem there. I thought you were saying Hashem is the source of it. Turn the microphone toward me. That's wonderful. Okay, and then I'll switch wrists if this one gets tired. Thank you. It's amazing how many of the wonderful things that we have going on in the tikkun olam of every single illness, of every single difference, of every single movement, of every single civil rights organization, it usually comes from pain. So I'm going to ask you to do something strange. You can opt out of it. We're Jewish, we can always disagree with the speaker. I'm going to ask to break up in twos for just 3 minutes each. And I want you to think and share with your partner, and you'll each get 3 minutes to speak. What is something painful in your life that you turned into something good? Now maybe it took 40 years. Maybe it's barely flowering now. But is there something painful that you were able to turn into something else? Is there some way that you felt different or isolated or shut down, or you're not with the flow of what you thought the cool kids or the cool whatever were, or the people who seem to have it easy? And that thing turned into something, or you turned it into something, or with the help of a community you turned it into something. Is there something that was painful, and from that pain something emerged? So anybody have any questions about the 3 minutes each? So if you'll have 3 minutes to talk, the other person will listen. One note about the listening. There are people who listen a little too loud. So if you listen by saying, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about, the same thing happened to me when I said, that's called an interruption. That's not listening. And the other thing is, if you nod too aggressively, there are people who are trained in Carl Rogers therapy who nod all the time and say, yeah. That can sometimes become an interruption, and your kippah might fall off. So please know that listening means listening. It means listening with your heart. It means listening with your soul. You will probably learn something about the other person that hopefully you'll keep confidential and private. And you'll also learn something about yourself and your journey from listening to the person. So let's do that. 3 minutes each, and I'll say go, and then after 3 minutes I'll say switch, to talk about something painful that you turned into, or that with the help of others, you turned into something that was holy, that was beautiful, that was healing, that created wisdom, or things that shared with others some wisdom. Any question before we start? And again, if someone wants to opt out, you can. So let's pick a partner, and then I'll say, does anybody not have a partner? And then we'll have a roving person go and find that person. Pick a partner, please. Does anyone not have a partner? Please raise your hand. Okay, we've got 2 people right next to each other who don't have a partner. Okay. Ready? The first person will speak and the other person will listen for 3 minutes. Ready? Go.
I feel very self-conscious about
brother, third child, is in college, and it was a year prior to a big my father was my mother had been so obviously it's very tragic. What came out of it there's a scholarship, there's 2 scholarships. You get that. I had my parents and it breaks. You know, that it's one
I'll share with you. You'll probably be one of the few people who wish I had enough. People who knew at the time. And something trying to figure out how to it's interesting.
In a few seconds, you can switch. The person who's speaking will finish, and it's time to switch. The listener becomes the speaker becomes the listener. If you haven't switched, please switch.
And they knew. They knew they weren't do it. It was a really weird experience. And especially trying to figure and part of it is,
It turned out, I mean, it was hell in the way.
brothers and
I like your story.
It's kind of my biggest darkest. Guarantee you there's plenty of worse things out there.
Not everybody just shut himself off. So how, yeah,
whatever.
I don't know whether it's accepting the people or not.
Yeah.
That's not what this is about, sorry.
I know, it's embarrassing to tell you that didn't talk about it. It seemed like the right time to say it to somebody.
In a few seconds, we'll switch again. Back to the front. So the speaker who's speaking will wrap up and then we'll look forward again. If I could have your attention again. So take one or two comments. Did something important or frustrating happen for any of you? By the way, is this new microphone working well for you? Yes. Okay. I wanted to apologize. This nice man offered it to me at the beginning, but I'd never done this before. I'd never done what Madonna and everybody walks around with. And I thought it was going to cause an echo, and it was going to make me feel disoriented. So I said, no, thank you. However, I was wrong. And it's working quite well. And if
You're well wired.
I am well wired now.
You need a nice blue cord to go with your...
Okay, I'll work on that. So, did anyone have something happen just now that you wanted to stand up and share with everybody, which will still be confidential? We won't go spreading it all over town. Anything happen that was an important insight or something that you think might be helpul for others to hear? Okay, so we don't have anyone volunteering for that. Go ahead.
My partner's asking me to say something.
Okay.
I wouldn't have, but
And I promise to repeat what she's saying to everybody.
I have a very loud voice. I was raised in a family where I had an older sister who was loved, and then I was born, and then my parents had a son, and he took priority, and I really became a non-entity in my family. I became, the middle kid, non-entity, no voice. I didn't have my own room. I didn't have, and I really struggled with that. And in my work today, what I do is, and I've been doing it, and I only learned the connection between these two things in the last few months when I was struggling with depression, where a therapist put the two pieces together. What I do today is I make sure that people who are marginalized or don't have a voice or are not allowed to speak have a voice in the healthcare field to speak for their own medical positions. So I do a lot of work around transitioning the developmentally disabled who now it's not their parents anymore. There's a presumption they can't speak, means they can't think and can't make their own decisions. And so my life's work has become, out of that childhood, giving voice to those who don't normally have a voice, and that's what I do. And then last fall, or several years ago, I fell and shattered my shoulder and became physically disabled myself, and have learned what it means to be disabled in that way, and that, in fact, as the disability community will tell of you, any of you who are not disabled are really TABs. You are temporarily able-bodied. Those have informed the work that I do, and realize that I've been able to contribute to some teeny way to Coon along, but only because of what happened in my childhood.
Beautiful, thank you. So I wanted to ask the question, in terms of forming a tribe, how many of you, either in your professional work or in your family or personal life or just in your friendship circle, how many of you on some level are in the same tribe that she's in, helping to bring voice to the voiceless? Okay? So about 30% of the room is in the tribe. And what's fascinating is, usually you feel alone in whatever you're working on, and then slowly you start to find out, oh, there's other people who share the same, either similar experiences or different experiences that brought them to be very passionate about bringing the voice to the voiceless. So now I'm going to detour to, that one of the benefits so far of being different is that it allows you to feel something's broken. Some wound that you have allows you to have more compassion and more involvement with people who share a slightly similar wound. And then eventually, maybe 30 or 40 years later, you find out, oh, these things are connected. That wound that I have is connected to this beautiful work I'm doing. Or maybe you never find it out. Maybe it's at your memorial service. But hopefully you'll find it out before your memorial service so that you can talk about it.
I am such compassion for right-handed people. I didn't understand.
Okay, that's great. So, one of the things that happens, though, Bob, you want to say something?
So there are also those of us who aren't challenged, and we also find ourselves at a great disadvantage. Many of us at our age who have medical issues and everything like that, we are at a loss because we need to be our own advocate.
Yes.
If not, the doctor will be the health giver will be the advocate, or the government will be the advocate. And those, at least in my instance, are not the best deciders for my issues and my condition. And I just think we as individuals must stand up for our rights,
Right.
but stand up and say, this, no doctor, this is not helping. Or no doctor, this is not doing that, or whatever. But many of us don't. We just listen to what the doctor says, we go in, check up, the health provider says this, and that's it. And we need to stand up more for ourselves.
This is great. He's pointing out that
We have you can have an advocate or something like that, I forget what they're called, the
ombuds.
person.
So if you don't have a lot of training or experience in standing up for yourself or standing up for others because you learned to either go with what was working well or you just learned to be polite and compliant, there will come a time when you will be tested to say, can I really stand up? Can I do Gevura, limit setting, or am I stuck in loving kindness and compassion? And how do I do the Gevura limit setting in an appropriate and loving kindness kind of way? So this is the detour. The first benefit is you learn to advocate because something happened that's wounding, either happened a long time ago or it's just happened recently. And you learn to advocate from what's broken. Or you don't learn to advocate and then you're in trouble. But one of the things that happens when you first learn to advocate, we're sometimes clumsy about that. And a lot of people have a chip on their shoulder, they've had a chip on their shoulder for a long time, or their energy is just too much for everybody else. They're good at advocating, they're good at speaking up for themselves, but it takes all the air out of the room and nobody wants to play with them. Okay? So how to do that becomes the project. How do I do that? What seems to work with that kind of person in that kind of setting? And it's very specific. I know that for me, I'm a touchy-feely guy who's kind of emotional. So I think that's the door I should go through. So one year I was advocating for my son at an IEP, as an individualized educational plan. You have to fight every year, and you have to bring out your inner Gloria Allred. To fight for your kids, and if you don't have an inner Gloria Allred, you got to hire one. It's expensive. To fight for the counseling and the speech therapy and the occupational therapy and all things for your kid. If you don't do well at that meeting, for the next year, your kid's just floating. Okay. So we're at this IEP meeting, and I'm talking to this guy about the fact my son's got really severe dyslexia. I mean, he was, in 10th grade then, he's reading at a first grade level, and so I think he needs some remedial reading program, okay? The test scores are here and here, he's got this really high verbal intelligence, he knows vocabulary really high, and he's reading at a first grade level. It's all there, fact-wise it was all there. The assistant principal sitting there going, well, I don't think we're going to be able to authorize any reading services, and I'm starting to get hot under the collar, and so I use my language to try to appeal to him. And I tried going through the guilt door, okay? And I said, what I don't understand is when you guys got into this profession and you really cared about these kids with dyslexia, isn't this one of the moments where you'd want, I'm doing Queen Esther here. This is the reason why Queen Esther was born, to stand up for the Jewish people. And, I'm doing this whole thing here, and he's icy cold. He's icy cold. He says, we really don't authorize much more, 5 years ago we did, but now we didn't, and it's because of Sacramento. They blame Sacramento. It's like an overall term for whenever they don't want to spend money, I think they blame Sacramento. What is Sacramento? You're being cheap. So I'm getting nowhere with this guy, and I'm starting to get a little bit, my wife's looking at me like, are you going to get ugly here? Or, because we have to work with these people. And I realized I was being completely ineffective. So we tabled the meeting, and we decided to have a new meeting, and I went and talked to somebody, and I was ventilating to another parent. I was saying, when I was trying to deal with so-and-so, and I was trying to go through the guilt door, I was getting nowhere. He said, well, why would you go through the guilt door with him? He has Asperger's. And not all Asperger's people, every single person is different and unusual, and everybody's unique and different, but a little light bulb went off, which is, well, that's not probably a door that he speaks most of the time. That's not his language. He has a different language. His language has to do with structures and order and precedent and all the things that lawyers and accountants, love and engineers love. And he's got that kind of a brain. It's a wonderful brain. And it's wonderful that he's the assistant principal. He's a great assistant principal. He went on great field. He arranged the logistics for every field trip for my son's class. He's great at logistics. Guilt is not his language. Don't speak a language he doesn't speak. So we went back and had another meeting, and I came in with all sorts of charts and things and facts and things were out of order in those charts. I was able to show that and if we're going to get these charts to be lined up, we've got to get this kid the special services. And he agreed. And he agreed. And I wasn't being manipulative here. I was just speaking a language that he speaks and being appropriate in this setting where he had the power. I didn't have the power. And his language was the language that was going to win or lose me. So one of the things you can do, rather than having a chip on your shoulder, always come in with the exact same cudgel. How many of you remember the movie by Barry Levinson, Avalon, where they come to the Thanksgiving dinner and Lou Jacoby walks in and says, "You serve the turkey, you serve the turkey." I mean, that guy came in cruising for a bruising. He was going to throw a fit no matter what. He was always late for the holiday dinners, and this time when they started without him, he was furious because he likes to go off. I mean, he gets great joy, he gets nachas from going off on people. So if you got that kind of a temper, if you've got that kind of a communication style, and every time someone says something that offends you, you alienate them instead of somehow bringing them onto your wisdom, figure out what you can do. People learn better communication styles. What language works with that person? I'm not asking you to be a phony and a hypocrite. I'm asking you to figure out what works in that situation that also has integrity for you, that also can bring services to this person, that can also make sure that you're speaking in a way that's part of your truth, but it's maybe the different way than you normally speak. It's a way that's much more effective in this setting. So that's another benefit of being different, is that you have to sometimes learn how to operate with people who are different from you. And it's a great teaching, it's a great inclusiveness. You're able to not judge. And I hope I wasn't judgmental toward this vice principal. I was judgmental until I found out, oh, he speaks a different language from me. I need to honor that. That's different from putting him down or making fun of him. I did make fun of him a little bit in the way I told the story today, and I apologize for that.
That's the question. My wife and I survived it, but when you are told as a parent, be involved with your children, get involved, know what goes on in their room, come to meetings, let us know what you think. They don't mean it.
The school doesn't mean it when they say get involved in your kid's life. Okay.
Yeah, in other words, be an advocate for your own child. They don't mean it.
Well, I don't know about that particular person and that particular thing, but I will say, even if that school was trying to blame the parent and they really don't want parent involvement, which I think is what was in your story, I'll still vote for the parent involvement.
Yeah.
I'll still vote for the knowledgeable parent who will figure out a way to, even with that teacher who's a blamer and a non-take responsibility kind of person, how to get that going. Because time is short and your kids need you. And your grandkids need you and your nieces and nephews need you. So whatever Michigas they have, that's not my problem. My problem is,
Good answer.
how am I going to lovingly set limits with this person and not get ugly with them, in order to get things to accomplish. Okay, go ahead.
Mine is a little off the beaten path, but since I'm talking to Queen Esther, I am sure that you'll understand. Hope we never have the same thing. What do you do when, and it's a little different about speaking, when you've known someone, could be 50 years, 40, 30, 2 days, whatever, and you know them very well, and they never say hello to you. Maybe they think the wheelchair has taken away your understanding of what hello means. A touch is just good. You don't want to talk, you're afraid you're going to catch something. But there are many people that do that. They've known you for years, and yet if they walk right by you, don't acknowledge you, they'll go to the next row of people. Happens at synagogue a lot.
Right.
And they hug them and they kiss them. and they embrace them, everything. But you, they act like they don't even know you. So what do you do with people like that? Well, here's what I've learned. Inside, after a while, I almost laugh to myself. It's their loss. The ones that I really care about, and there was one particular person in this room now that I did this with, and it works good. I said to her, I said, you know, you never say hello to me. See, I happen to like this gal very much. I said, you never say hello to me. Oh, I didn't realize that. I said, oh, you know, we've known each other for years. So I said something to her. And since then, even if it's a wave, well, and she's a very busy gal, she works very hard. And there's a way of responding, like I said, a wave, a smile, a touch, a hello. But there are many people that don't even, they ignore you. So that's another kind of, it's not the same approach as what you've been addressing.
No, that is. I'm going to put it back into what I said.
There are many people like that.
That's great. So one of the things that you did there is you found the balance between limit setting, firmness, and loving kindness. Total firmness would have been, what's the matter with you? How come you never say hello to me? What am I, chopped liver? Okay, that, you know, maybe that would work in certain parts of the country, but it probably wouldn't work in California. You didn't do that. You said, and you gave her the loving sandwich. You gave her the loving sandwich. You said, we've known each other for a long time. And by the tone of voice and by the eye contact, you said, you matter to me. And the other thing you did that was limit setting was, you said, I'm not going to go one-on-one with every single person who's done this to me. I'm going to discriminate. I'm going to pick the people I'm willing to exert that effort with. I'm not going to drain all my effort on every single person and have a whole lot of failures. I'm going to go for the high probability ones that actually are people that matter to me that might come through. So combining knowing your own limits, having some limits in the way you do it, doing it with some lovingly, say you matter to me. When you look into someone's soul and say you matter to me, and that's why I'm saying to this, it sounds a lot different than how could you be so stupid or how could you be so rude, as you know, because that I missed the soul connection in that tone of voice. Yours had a warmer tone of voice. You brought the loving kindness in. It increased the likelihood of success. It's a muzzle tone. I'm going to keep going on. So other benefits of being different. Another benefit of being different is that people experience all these different aspects of life that the rest of the people are missing. You know, so if your grandson loves light and loves music and can't do verbalizations and something else and something else and something else, there's a whole world of light and music. Is this person somehow going to introduce the rest of us to light and music? Are they going to notice things that the rest of us don't? Is this person, there's something about this person, they love a certain color. What about that color? Is there a way that you've been taking that color for granted, now all of a sudden this person becomes your teacher about that color? Is there a way that this person slows the rest of us down? And because they operate on a slower level, it forces other people to slow down, which is not such a terrible thing. We're forced to slow things down. We're forced to create Shabbat environments of unhooking from the rush and the do more and the be more and all that stuff. When you interact with this person, you're actually in a much more peaceful state because you've come to a place of saying, I'm going to stop with the rushing so that I don't trip over this person, step on this person, miss the connection with this person. They've given you the gift of doing that. I know that in my relation with my wife and my son, I'm usually the scheduled person. I mentioned last night I have a German Jewish father. I know the schedule when we're on vacation. We're going to be doing this, 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 and this. For my wife and my son, my schedule is so irrelevant to what's going to go on today. Because they live in a timeless universe of, wow, look at that. Did you see that vase? That vase is really beautiful. Look at that color of sage on that vase and the way that the plant comes out of it. Okay? And all of a sudden, we're looking at the vase, and then we learn something about the vase, and then we wind up going to the museum that the vase comes from, and then we have this wonderful experience in the museum, and my wife is a ceramicist, and so I learn a lot about ceramic. We didn't go to the thing that I had on the schedule that I had already figured out the logistics and the transportation for. We went on a detour, and on the detour, a holy thing happened. Now, I've learned years ago to stop fighting that. People who are much more ADHD, who are much less time-driven, as I'm time-driven, are my teachers on how to experience moments of life that I would miss otherwise. So a lot of times, if this person has gifts and has things that they are paying attention to, you have to figure out, am I going to ignore it, fight it, tell them they're wrong for having this way, or am I going to benefit that the universe, God, or whatever has put this in my place so that I can find the holiness of this too. Now, sometimes you don't have time for it. Sometimes we really are dealing with real deadlines, like the airplane's going to take off at a certain time. But my desire to get to the airport way too early and their desire to make it lots more exciting, sometimes balances out. Okay? You wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, my husband and I, just in a mood last night, we binge watched Happy Feet 1 and 2. And there's the penguin who can't sing but can dance. And then there's the penguin who can't dance but can sing. And both of them bring incredible gifts of survival. It was silly cartoon at some level, and at another,
it's wonderful.
interesting movies to binge watch.
It's wonderful. And in the movie Happy Feet, which I don't know if you've seen it, but it's this wonderful movie, and it's real joyous, it's really wonderful. And 9/10 of the way through the movie, there's this one scary scene. They had to make some scary scenes in order to make it dramatic. And there's a scene where the boat propeller is going around and the penguins almost get hurt. My son bolted out of the movie theater. Now, my first reaction, from I have a European-born father who was a hitter. So my first reaction was, I need to teach him not to do that, okay? That was the first thought that ran through my mind. Fortunately, I've done enough work that I was able to edit that before I did that to him. And what I did is I went outside and I said, tell me what just happened. He said, I didn't want the penguin to get chopped up by the helicopter, and it was also the loud music. The music in the movies comes on, and people who are sensitive, they experience the loud music, so they need to leave. One time we went to a Debbie Friedman concert at Universal Amphitheater, and Craig Tallman and Debbie Friedman, all the all-stars were there, and there were all these people loving it, loving it, loving it. It was too much for my son. So we went outside behind, the walls, and we found his tribe. There were 17 different kids of different ages who were all sensorily sensitive, and they were all there. So we had conversations with each other. We got to meet each other. We wouldn't have met each other if it weren't for this, And they were tribe. And they all had loving parents, or loving grandparents, or loving aunts and uncles, who were going with them on this journey to say, I need to be farther away from this loud amphitheater sound that makes me want to cringe, okay? And it was a wonderful concert. I missed most of it, but I had holy moments off on the side there. You get to decide which holy moments you want. There's lots of choices. You had a comment.
If you understand a little Yiddish, we used to say, I heard in my home all the time, so meins übergehen.
You translate for everybody.
So meins übergehen. Let me serve as the recipient of this saying, or doing. So meins übergehen. And this is, I think, that carried me over into my profession as a cantor for the past 40 years. I would always have to say, so meins übergehen. So that was, it doesn't matter. So meins übergehen.
That's good. So one of the things that he illustrates with that, and you get to pick your own mantra, there are mantras that you can say to yourself at a moment where instead of getting reactive, you become mindful. You say, this is not going to tip me over. This is not going to cause me to lose connection with what's happening. People who are in 12-step programs sometimes say, this is not going to cause me to lose my serenity. And when you can say that to just about anything, and you can hold on to your integrity, or your serenity, or your peacefulness, or the balance between loving kindness and limit setting, if you say stuff like that to yourself, or if you even do what I mentioned this morning, if you just say, where are you? I'm real agitated, I'm real disapproving, I'm in a hurry, da-da-da-da. Hineni, here I am, and it boosts your energy. You wake up more, you feel more available to deal with the next moment, instead of feeling trapped and shut down and reactive and all those things. These are things you can use at any moment, whether it's a Yiddish phrase, a Hebrew phrase, an English phrase, a Buddhist phrase, whatever phrase works for you. Those are the moments where you come back and you're able to be useful rather than being reactive, hurting yourself, hurting others, having to spend years trying to clean it up. So a couple more things about what makes people different, and it's a positive. Okay, and then I'm going to open up for discussion. Another thing that makes it positive is sometimes the way that we hurt, the way that we experience disappointment, the way that we can't get access to certain things, really causes you to appreciate on such a deep level the things you can do. So for instance, I know that there are lots of things in life that I cannot do. Okay, I'm not a very good dancer if it's a sequencing dancing. I have a sequencing thing. If it's free-form dancing, I can do it. But sequencing dancing, I'm not so good at. There's another thing that I can't do. I can't drive a stick shift. I tried. I don't have the sequencing to do that. There's lots of other things that I can't do. And by honoring the things that I can't do, and saying, you know, I tried that, I may still try it again, but I really appreciate the things that I can do. In the food allergies department, I'm allergic to dairy, wheat, corn, and sugar. I can't eat those things without having 2 or 3 days of really violent eruptions. But I can eat a lot of things. And I cherish the things that I can eat. So one of the things I've learned with my special needs son and with other people in the special needs community is we take such joy from the things someone can do. Let's see if I can tell this story without crying, but maybe I'll cry. So usually my son gets to do plays from a group called the Miracle Project. A woman named Elaine Hall has a son who's totally nonverbal, and she brought theater people in to interact with him in his world. She formed this theater project, and there was this thing called Autism the Musical, which won. Am I talking way too fast for the interpreter? Okay, I apologize. So anyway, it won an Emmy for when HBO showed it. It was the first year. All the messy part of it got a lot easier since then. The Miracle Project. But he's always been in theater projects that were improvisational. These kids would come up with their own characters based on what they do. If there was one kid who was always going like this, he became the cheerleader for other people's successes in the show. If some kids were like always walking away and like needing to leave, they would create a character around that. Whatever the kids' thing was, they would create a character. So everybody was participating. You didn't have to be this talented little superstar, little, you know, Annie with the curly red hair. You didn't have to be that to be in these shows. So each year I trusted that Stephen would have a wonderful experience in the Miracle Project, and they would create shows around his thing. His thing is fashion design. One year they did a chorus line of another kind where everybody imagined themselves in the future, and he imagined himself with a runway fashion show with his designs. It was just so beautiful. So you cry. Well, at his school this year, this woman came in, and she said she's going to do a play. They're going to do The Wizard of Oz, and she's going to have tryouts. As soon as she said tryouts, major body reaction going on. He's like, tryouts, you've got to be kidding. So now my child gets to experience rejection because he's not going to get into the tryouts. So he decided he wanted to be the scarecrow. And he worked his buns off to get ready for the tryouts. I assumed as much as I could. I've always been involved in his theater stuff, but I pulled back to see what can he do without as much help as he. And he tried out and he got the part. Now I was really nervous. So now he's going to have to memorize 72 lines. His previous max was 6. And he's going to have to do a whole long song. I would not be just a nothing, my head all full of stuffing. You know, and so he's going to sing the song. He cannot sing. He can't carry a tune. He can't memorize. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? So we brought in this woman who was really fun. And she created a character called Grandma Olga. And Grandma Olga sits in the back row. And if Stephen doesn't project, Grandma Olga's not going to be able to hear it. And so he did the whole thing for Grandma Olga. Okay, because he's got a great heart. He's got great compassion. He worked really hard. And he did the show. And these kids, you know, some of them, there was one kid who had a seizure in the middle of the show. There were kids who couldn't remember their lines. There were kids who couldn't project. There was all sorts of stuff that my relatives in Michigan could not have sat through. Okay, I'm just putting it out there. They like talent. This would have been way beyond what they could handle. They're compassionate, good people, but they would not have made it through this show. So the show was beautiful, and at the end, they were all singing "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," and the song, goes, "Why oh why can't I?" And the whole audience is weeping because these kids are standing up there saying, "There's this whole world over the rainbow. Why oh why can't I experience that?" And it was so beautiful and it was so holy. And they all loved being a part of this Wizard of Oz show. They had no judgment. And we were so scared about the accompanists. Accompanists sometimes want the kid to go on their key and their timing. They found this holy accompanist who knew exactly, he was so talented. No matter how fast or slow or how long the pauses were, this accompanist went with each kid. It was so beautiful. So the idea of the rest of us learning to follow someone's rhythm and to be flexible enough and loving enough and compassionate enough to find someone else's rhythm is such an act of holiness. And to see that there's a lot of people who want to do that. And it was really beautiful. I was talking to the accompanist. I said, "You are amazing." I said, so we were talking about this, that, and the other thing. And then I mentioned to the accompanist that my son Stephen was adopted. And the accompanist said to me, he goes, "Oh my gosh," he said, "I was adopted." He said, "One of the reasons I'm always good at going with other people's flows is because that's what I had to learn as a kid. I was never around people who were like me. I was always trying to figure out what works in this situation, what works in this situation. So I learned to go with other people's flows." He goes, "I've never put that together before." Just like you said, "I've never put that together before." All I said to him was my son was adopted. He did the rest of the work himself. It's amazing once you tune into the idea of appreciating what someone can do, how many blessings and fulfilling things you will see. If you switch to the noticing what someone can't do, you will live in a lot of pain. Especially if you're going to be around people who don't do it the way you do it. Because you'll experience always that they don't do it right. So you get to choose which rhythm you want to be on. Go ahead.
Most of you know my son Mickey, who is on the autism spectrum, and he has minimal verbal capacity. And years ago, shortly after he was diagnosed, so he may have been 3, 4 years old, we went to the National Autism Conference. And most of the workshops we attended were about different therapy programs, techniques for your child. And one argument is, do you force a square peg into a round hole? But the most valuable workshop I went to was called Navigating the Emotional Journey. It was about how to live with being the parent of a special needs child. And the best take-home lesson for the entire week we were there came from that workshop. It was to look for the gift in your child, which speaks directly to what you were saying. And not that I didn't love my child before, but it had only been a year since what we call the diagnosis bomb. Your world implodes, and it's my child will never be able to do this, and how are we going to manage and all this stuff. But it kind of the light bulb that goes off in your head, it flipped a switch. And not that there haven't been challenging moments and frustrating and days that have made us cry, but the joy that we get from the gifts that he does provide, and I think some of you have experienced that for yourself from him, is just wonderful. And really that should apply to every child, not just one with special needs. How many times do parents get on me, "Oh, you can't do this and this and that, and why can't you be more like your brother," or whatever else. So to really with anyone to look for that positive, and what do you gain from that?
And those lines that she just tossed out at the end there, those soul-crushing comments that all of us heard growing up, that all of us pass on sometimes unconsciously. Why can't you be like so-and-so, and look at what you can't do, and you're not trying, or one of the best sellers for ADHD people is called "You're not lazy, crazy, or stupid," because that's what people get called. And they're not. They just have a very different way of processing information and going on detours that those of us who are linear don't understand. But they're mostly the creative people. So this idea of the emotional journey and knowing that there's going to be a gift, and to think that there's going to be a gift there, to have that as your mantra, your perspective, is such a gift to you. Because the gift might not be visible at first. It might take a while before. A lot of times my wife and I, every week we have a long walk and talk, and we're sorting out the crises of the week. And I'm the male, I'm supposed to fix things, and she's the female, she's allowed to ventilate more what's going wrong. We still got that. Every relationship usually has a maximizer and a minimizer. Sometimes I get to be the maximizer, but usually I get to be the minimizer, the one who says, I think we're going to figure this out, And I don't know the answer at that moment, but I want to be loving and all that stuff. So on those walks sometimes, to just say, I don't know the answer. I haven't seen yet how this is going to turn out positive. In fact, right now it seems really scary and awful. And we'll stick together in trying to find out what is possible. We'll stick together to find out what's possible is enough. I can do my male fix-it thing just around the we'll stick together to make it possible. And this is a hard issue for men, because men, we do not like being impotent. I once had a supervisor when I was doing my clinical practice, and she said, I'm going to send you this couple that's so impossible they're going to help you get in touch with your impotence. And I've lived in California long enough to say, thank you for sharing that. I'm really looking forward to this. And the idea that there are situations that we cannot fix, and there are things that we have great intentions for, and we can't solve it with our great intentions. To be able to hang out with that for a few moments is a wonderful thing. It's a part of life. And then beyond that, the sticking together that we're going to somehow do the best we can with this situation is also good. And then the other one is, we don't know the answer, but let's find out who does. I did learn years ago that the greatest managers are not the people who have the answers, they're the people who are 1 to 4 phone calls away from the answer. And once you realize that, it's an amazing gift. For those of you who are male, or who are female, but you've learned how to be more traditionally male in the world, I want to offer you the possibility that you don't have to have the answer, but you don't have to know what to ask. Quick example, Medicare forms. I have a lot of Medicare clients, and the Medicare form kept changing how they wanted it done. I kept getting my Medicare forms rejected, and I was going to figure it out. So I kept trying this and trying this and trying this and sending it in. 6 weeks later, you get a response from the company. At that time, it was Palmetto in Georgia that was responding. And it always came back rejected. Just like in the early days of computer, we had 10,000 of those cards, and if one of the cards had a typo, the whole thing spit out as will not compute. Okay, so that's what was happening to me. And I said to myself this line, what would a woman do? What would a woman do? Because I've got this male brain, and the male brain is trying to figure it out. Bad decision. What would a woman do? She would ask colleagues who get their Medicare forms approved, how did you do it? What a concept. So I asked the 5 people in my suite, how do you do Medicare forms now? They showed me. They had 5 different ways of doing it. 4 of them were getting 100% responses. I followed one of their methods. I solved the problem. But it came from getting out of my male brain of I have to figure it out. And for some women, they have that same kind of brain. Even if I bust my head against that wall, I'm going to figure this out. It's not a good strategy. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not. So one more thing about being different, and then I'll just open up for comments and questions. The other thing about being different, we've mentioned how people become great advocates, how they sometimes experience life in a deeper way. They start looking for gifts in ways that other people are missing out on those gifts. They change their style in order to connect with another person's style, and it expands their repertoire of styles. Another thing about being different that's so profound and wonderful is that once you accept that you are different, that you've got all sorts of things that are different, you can stop running away from your differences. So for instance, if there's some part of your Jewishness that you're still uncomfortable about, this weekend is one of the few times that I've been called Lenny. Okay? I stopped being Lenny when I became a psychologist. I thought Lenny, well, I'll tell the story in a different way.
We didn't call you Pizzala.
We didn't call her Lenny's always been my name. But when I became a psychologist, I started calling myself Len Felder. So I was working at this Brotherhood Sisterhood camp sponsored by the National Conference of Christians and Jews. We dealt with racism and sexism. And this one friend of mine, Melinda Garcia, we always would talk about things in a real open way. She comes out, she goes, Lenny, is the reason why your business card says Len Felder because you think Lenny's too ethnic? And I said, you're too smart for your own good. And she said, can I tell you a secret? She says, I think people know you're Jewish. She said, it might be the way you talk with your hands. It might be the way you look. It might be the way that there's a million things about you that are clearly Jewish. If you think you can hide it, go for it. So, on you being different for being Jewish, is there still some piece that needs to be unraveled with that? On you being different for being the man or the woman that you are. Maybe you're a sensitive man and it's still not okay. Maybe you're a woman with a voice and it's still not okay. Maybe you're, whatever it is, whatever part of the gender spectrum you're on, and you're still disapproving yourself, is there some way that someone else putting out their being different, they just seem to let it flow into the world, can that give you a little more permission in some of your settings? Can the fact that someone can't control the fact that they're showing that they're different? There are people who hide it. There are people who they don't show you until they get to know you. But there are other situations where this person's going to just show it. Is that some sort of a liberation, a freedom from Mitzrayim or constriction or narrowness that you're able to do this year? Is there some way that you're going to be freer from being around that? So anyway, I want to open up to questions, comments, reactions, things that you'd like to ask or share or pretend to be asking, but actually you're sharing. So go ahead.
You talked about looking for the strength or the language in somebody else. And you gave several wonderful examples. You gave several wonderful examples about finding the language of somebody else or what one of their strengths are. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, what if I don't know how to do that? Or what if I can't or think I can't? Do you have any tips on how to do that? Especially, I don't know, maybe if you're real analytical, I don't know if that's part of the problem, but how do you do it?
So one thing is, if you're a book reader, you read books about someone who's like that, and you learn more about it. Another thing is you can get a coach or a mentor. So for instance, in psychology, once you get your degree or your license, most people stop consulting with others. But I'm always calling people on the phone. I have people who are expert at things that I'm lousy at. So for instance, I'm not good at being cheap. I'm not good at conserving and saving money. It's not something I'm good at. But I know a couple people who are. So when I'm starting to get judgmental or impatient with one of my therapy clients or one of my friends who are really cheap and they're always measuring the dollar value of everything, I will call up one of my friends who are my gurus on being cheap. Frugal is the more appropriate word.
Economically challenged.
Okay, I'm economically challenged. They're very aware. So I'll come up and I'll say, I'm getting impatient, with somebody because they said such and such. What would that be like for you? And they explained to me exactly what it's like. They understand that person's point of view. I said, and how would you talk to someone like that to get them to be about 20% a little more loose on that, to have a little bit of wiggle room so that their partner doesn't want to divorce them, And they say, well, if you give me this, this, and this, I can have more wiggle room, but if you ask me to go that far, I can't do that. I said, great, thank you. So I just got consultation on something that I have a blind spot about, okay? So whether you read about it, whether you consult about it, or sometimes you just ask the person. You can say to the person, I noticed that when I talk to you about such and so, we don't seem to see eye to eye. What would be the way that we could connect? My wife and I have had conversations like this. We have a situation where when there's a crisis, I say, let's mobilize and take fast action and make decisions. My wife is a Libra. My wife says, let's weigh several alternatives several times until we make it. She makes great decisions. She hates being rushed. So what we'll do then is I'll say, okay, I'm starting to, this crisis is happening. I'm starting to go into action mode. If I were a Libra, how would I, and she'll explain to me what a Libra can do. And then I get to choose. Do I want to do Libra style, or is the emergency so much that my Capricorn that jumps from mountain crag to mountain crag quickly? Whichever one we're going to pick, at least I know that both, and I have to get off the judgment or the shaming about it. She's not wrong, and I'm not wrong for having different styles. Hopefully they can work together. But we've got enough rapport that I can ask her, teach me the thing that my brain doesn't seem to come up with so that I can do it. And I've had clients with Asperger's who also do that with their partners. They'll say to their partners, I'm not understanding the emotional thing that you're talking about. Can you explain it to me just a little slower? They come up with verbiage so they can ask for what they need. And if it's scripted, they can do it. So with yours, if you ask people, what is it that we could do that would set up a way of talking to each other about that thing? Because I see it differently, and you see it differently, but we're both really smart. We're both really smart, or we're both really caring, or we're both really good people, is how you honor, like I mentioned here before, it's how you honor that person. You matter to me, and I cherish you. And then we have this completely incompatible way of speaking, so let's figure out what's the bridge in between your way and my way. Go ahead.
Is it a left brain or a right brain thing to not reinvent the wheel?
There were 2 points you were making, and I want to see the connection between the two. You said, is it a left brain or a right brain to not reinvent the wheel? Tell me what you meant. There's something behind it.
Well, referring back to filling out the Medicare forms, you said your wife would ask someone that's doing it successfully, and you're going to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
Doesn't it seem more a masculine thing to not reinvent the wheel? Seems.
I don't know. In this case, I was bumping up to the I cannot ask for directions male thing, because I will appear wimpy if I'm asking for help. Right. When in fact it was wisdom and it was strength to ask for help, but I had to override the masculine.
That seems like a left brain function. Logical.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, reactions? Anything you wanted to share with the group? Because we've got a group here. It's amazing how things happen during a moment and something will carry on for it. When you were talking before about, is it Michael and Mickey? When Michael and Mickey are going to go and collect people's fruit, the gleanings of the field, which is from Leviticus 19, that got me thinking. I'm always trying to figure out, because the word transition is so terrifying, and what's my son going to do, and the idea of setting up something, probably non-profit, not really about money, that allows them to do the very thing that they enjoy doing, and to do it in a way that serves others, and it creates a connection between this and this and this. That opens up amazing amounts of circuitry, to make things happen. That's a beautiful model for how to do something that's going to work for everybody, and everybody's going to be grateful for it. It's going to bless lots of people in that circle. So that got me ideas. I'm going to borrow that and pay you royalties. Any other last comments? Okay, well, I just wanted to do a quick thank you for today. If you want more on the Jewish mindfulness methods, I mentioned them very quickly during services this morning, but I'm going to do more of that tomorrow. You or someone else can come, and let me just do a slight sales pitch. If someone had told me that these things existed when I was 20, I wouldn't have had to work as hard to find them. So the idea that people who are somewhat allergic to religion, and I just have to do a quick aside, there are lots of good Jewish people who are allergic to Jewish religion, okay? I don't know the exact statistics, but I think somewhere around 70% of Jews don't affiliate. And of the people who do affiliate, some of them affiliate because they like community and they like connection and they like, some of the things, or they want their kids to go to Sunday school.
They want to be gastronomic Jews.
And they want to be gastronomic. But the idea of connecting with Jewish spirituality and understanding what the prayers are really about, and understanding what Jewish meditation might be about, and how to use it in your daily life, and how to make Judaism a tree of life that really nourishes you on a daily basis, is so off limits to so many Jews. And so I'm on a mission to try to help Jews reconnect with that. So if there's someone who's allergic to Judaism or spirituality, but they've got a Jewish soul, I hope that they might come tomorrow to Or Rishon in Orangevale. Orangevale's in Whitford? It's a new word to me. I hope that they'll come or that you'll give something to them, but please don't shove it down their throat and don't twist their arm, because that's not how we proselytize our religion. In our religion, we just try to be a good person and hope that they'll, be inspired to say, where'd you learn that? And then they'll want to come with you to it. But if you can encourage people to explore the gems that are in Judaism that can help you in your daily life, it'll make the next generation much less allergic to this beautiful tradition that we've all inherited that most of us haven't been able to learn the good stuff from. Thank you.
Leonard, would you just stay with me just one more minute? Because I'd like to call Mario High up and hopefully Michael. Because they have something they would like to give you. And Nursey's going to come to the men of the family.
All is mine. I think I won't speak because I will read what I will present to you. Is that
Mike.
All right. Dr. Felder, we are honored to have you here. And on behalf of Michael Busina Inclusion Project, I'm presenting this certificate to you. Let me read it. It says, Certificate of Appreciation, Recognition and Appreciation for Outstanding Contribution and Service to our community and the Michael Busina Inclusion Project. Presented to Dr. Leonard Felder, honoring you and your presentation made on February 28, 2014 and March 1 and 2nd, 2014. Michael Busina Inclusion Project Scholar in Residence Weekend on Inclusion and Disabilities. With heartfelt thanks from the Michael Busina Inclusion Project. Thank you.
That's the most wonderful moment. Thank you. And, my heartfelt appreciation to all of you for being here today. And I hope that we see you tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Upload on YouTube or something? What do we do? I have access to it.